Everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave, the host of the Dark Stuff channel here on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking out my latest video. It is much appreciated. In this week's video, it's another hodgepodge, another this year's week segment. You just saw a little bit of the band Shiner, who I saw last night on a fantastic show. We're definitely going to be delving into that. But I had a lot of other stuff going on this week, not all of it positive. We're going to get to it right now. Before I get going with all of the regular stuff for the video, I want to point out I do have another new Dark Stuff playlist, this one for August 2024. It's posted, it'll be linked below. It's for Apple and Spotify. This time around, I've got music from Ted Leo and the Pharmacists, Water From Your Eyes, The Walkmen, ZZ Top, Wanda Jackson, Pat Benatar, Megadeth, Biz Marquee, A Living Color and Run DMC, Budgie, REM, Die Spitz, Throwing Muses, Celebrity Skin, Eels, Missing Persons, My Morning Jacket, Blue Oyster Cult, so much more. That's just a taste. Again, that's this month's Dark Stuff playlist. It'll be linked below. The reason that this video is later than it ordinarily would be is because we got hit with some major storms here in Omaha again last week, and this time it knocked out power for a huge swath of the city for multiple days. And as I'm recording this now, some like 40,000 people are still without power, including my own brother, who still doesn't have it. So last Wednesday night, which was July 31st, we had this major storm that just sort of blew in out of nowhere, came in around the dinner hour. It was not a tornado, but it was severe thunderstorms and winds up to 90 miles an hour. And I was down here in the bunker working on a video. The power flickered once or twice, but honestly, it didn't seem from just looking out my window that the storm was all that much. But then the next time it flickered, it shut off, and I didn't have power for the next 48 hours. Now, again, that's not the hugest deal in the world. 48 hours is not a crisis. Some people had it longer, but it was a lot for me to deal with. It was 95 degrees outside, and when you're inside with no airflow, it's even hotter. It was unbelievably just dense, thick air. I got to a point where to charge up my phone, because my phone was getting close to dying, I went and got in my car and just ran the air conditioning and drove around. But the storm damage was preventing me from hitting a lot of streets, and I thought, oh, I'll just go to a store and pick up something to drink or whatever. All the stores lost power too, so it was just a blackout all over the place. I went back home and I just sort of suffered through it in the ridiculous heat. The next morning, I went over to my parents' house, who didn't lose power, and I went on Amazon and I bought one of these deals. This is like a portable power thing, and I'm not one to endorse Amazon, but it was pretty cool that I could order that at like 8 in the morning and it arrived at 2 o'clock that same afternoon. So I got it. I brought it back to my folks' house to charge because it needed to charge up. And then I was going to use that for my devices so I could at least have that while I was sitting in the heat, because the Omaha Public Power District was saying it was something close to 7 to 8 days perhaps before everybody got their power restored. When I went and looked initially at the aftermath of the storm, I thought I got off light. Just knocked over my garbage cans. My recycling was all over the place. I just had to pick that up, and I thought, wow, I'm covered. Until I walked into my office and I noticed this plaster on the floor, and I look up and there's broken plaster there. And I'm like, well, this is weird. What the hell happened? So I walked outside to where that would be and noticed a giant tree branch embedded into my roof that broke through the roof and almost broke through my ceiling, but stopped just short of it. But it did break the plaster. So for the second night, I decided I was going to get a hotel, and I went on hotels.com and I booked a room at the 4 Points Sheraton, Omaha Midtown. Okay. And for 140 some odd dollars, I think it was $145. And I go down there and they acknowledged the reservation, but said they oversold and they didn't have a room for me. And sorry, I had to leave and I could get a refund. So of course I pitched a fit to the I demanded to talk to the manager. I turned into a total Karen, but justifiably so. And ultimately I didn't get a room. I mean, that was what happened. So I went home and just sort of suffered through it. Now, long story short, I did get a refund relatively quickly. It wasn't a big deal, side note. But I started sitting in my house, and it was even hotter, and it was even worse. And it was just like I was sitting in the dark in here, in the bunker, watching TV on my phone, sweating, and just barely feeling like I couldn't breathe, and I didn't understand. I had what I would describe as a panic attack. And it was maybe the first time I'd ever experienced something like that, but I legit thought I was going to die in this room. I wasn't going to make it through the night. I didn't understand how I could survive. I decided then I was going to go out in my car again and drive around and just try to get some air, but I really didn't want to have to come back. I took a chance and I called my parents, who were in their 80s, who are usually asleep by like 9:30, and called them. And it just so happened that my dad was awake, because he says he gets up like 10 times a night to take a pee. And he just happened to hear the phone when I called. He turned off the alarm. I went to their house, and I continued my meltdown till the next day. I mean, it was, according to the Omaha Public Power District, it was the largest outage in their history. 230,000 people lost power. This was massive. I felt lucky that I only lost it for 2 days. Like I said, my brother's going on 4, and they are telling people, to expect it to go for another couple of days before they've restored power to everybody. This was a rough one, folks. Next up, I wanted to address the ending of Aerosmith. You know, the band put out a post on all their social media places saying that they were going to stop touring. They were done. They couldn't do it, and they were calling it quits because Steven Tyler's voice couldn't recover, and they just were unable to get it together. They had booked a tour earlier. They had to cancel it and postpone it, and now they're just canceling it forever, and Aerosmith is kind of saying goodbye as a touring act. You know, and while this is a bummer, I do think it is being realistic, because sometimes bands can't last forever. I know everyone is quick to say the Stones are better than ever. Okay, I doubt that, but whatever. The point is, sometimes I've seen this firsthand with Kiss and with some other bands where they're just going on too long and they just can't do it anymore. And it's not a criticism of them. Getting old is a fact of life. Aerosmith are just as old as Kiss, okay? And at least they're being honest. You know what they could have done? Is just pretended like it wasn't a problem and gone out there and had Steven Tyler sing to a track or pretend to sing to a track while the rest of the guys, they could have faked the whole thing. My only negative about this, because I love Aerosmith and I haven't actually seen them since 1990, but I feel like this didn't allow them to go out on their own terms, okay? They're going out because of circumstances. If they had done this 2 years ago, before booking a tour, canceling it, booking it again, canceling it, and just acknowledged, you know what, we've had a great run. We've had 40, 50 years or whatever. We've done a lot of great shit. We've toured the world 100 times, and we are just going to retire. Thank you so much for the memories. We love you. Goodbye. And then they would have gone out on their own terms. But in this case, unfortunately, they were dealt a blow that they couldn't, survive. So they didn't go out on their own terms, and that is kind of sad for a band as important as Aerosmith. Kiss fans like me, you know that Kiss's album Creatures of the Night from 1982 did have some co-writers on it, and among those co-writers was Bryan Adams, mega famous Bryan Adams. He was just really getting his career going at the time, and his writing partner Jim Vallance. And they wrote 2 songs with Gene Simmons that appeared on the Creatures of the Night album, Rock and Roll Hell and War Machine. 2 great songs, very heavy. And when you think like Bryan Adams, like, wow, how weird that he's the one who co-wrote those songs, with Gene. Just out of nowhere, seemingly, the other day, Bryan Adams announced that he's starting his own record label, and his first release is going to be a double A-side 7-inch of him covering those 2 Kiss songs, Rock and Roll Hell and War Machine. He released a video for Rock and Roll Hell. So far, War Machine hasn't come out yet. I haven't heard it, but here's a little brief comparison of the 2.
So he held his hands high and he screamed.
Obviously, I prefer the Kiss version, and so does Vice President Harris, I believe. But he is selling this on his website. He's taking pre-orders now. It's $15 for the double-sided 7-inch. I am considering ordering it just because of the songs, and then I thought, wow, this is going to be the first time I've purchased a Bryan Adams music, something, a record, a tape, anything since 1985, when I actually saw Bryan Adams in concert in 1985 at the Civic Auditorium.
This has been so much fun, and thank you so much for coming. And also thank you.
You'd think with the storms and all this stuff that would be the only sort of weird event that would have happened this week, but my week actually started on what I thought would be a positive note, and that was I was going to see one of my favorite comedians, David Cross, play in a club here in Omaha. He was going to do 2 nights at the Waiting Room, a Monday and a Tuesday night. Obviously, this is a much smaller place than he would ordinarily play, and the idea was he's going to test out new material. Okay, he's going to do a major tour in theaters in September, and then he's going to ultimately tape a special, but he wanted to try out some new stuff in front of a crowd. So he booked the 2 nights in Omaha. I don't have any photos or any video because they made you put your phone away, and that makes sense, okay? I object to the idea of no phones in a concert, but with comedy, I totally understand, because you can't hear a joke a second time and have the same effect. Whereas you could hear the same song multiple times, no big deal, you know? It doesn't have that same, like, ruining effect. I would ruin the jokes if I were to post them on here. So I have to say the set was, like, decent, you know? I mean, I've never seen a major comedian like this work out new material. I've always seen them when they're polished and when they've got it down. So it was interesting to seeing him referring to notes and stuff and starting ideas and then being like, I don't know about that one or whatever. Some of the stuff was pretty funny, and some was just like kind of meandering and whatever, and you know he would have tightened that up. But overall, I felt, you know, happy to have seen David Cross in such a small place doing this brand new material, and I was kind of in the back of my mind going, I can't wait till I see the special on Netflix or wherever he puts it out, YouTube, Comedy Central, whatever, HBO, and see how those routines turned out in the final version. So the next day, I get notice that David Cross canceled the second show and went home. I'm like, oh, what happened, you know? My friend who I went to the show with thought, well, is that because the material didn't go over very well? He was unhappy with it or whatever? And that's kind of what I thought, too. He told the club that it was a family emergency and he had to leave, and I have no reason to believe that's not true. I mean, he could have had a family emergency, or it could have been that the crowd was kind of lukewarm to this stuff, and he's like, maybe I got to go back to the drawing board and write some new shit. I don't know. Either way, it was a very interesting concept being there with a major comedian like David Cross working out new stuff. Some of it not working, some of it working. It was pretty fascinating. If he did leave because he wasn't happy with the material, I almost think that's almost cooler in a certain way, because then I was the only one who got to see that shit, right? I mean, anyways. Okay, now let's talk about this concert I saw last night, because it was fucking awesome, okay? I didn't know, I had kind of no expectations going in. It's the band Shiner, who is from a band that used to be from Kansas City, and they were from the 90s, kind of along the a little heavier lines of 90s alternative rock, and I never actually got a chance to see them back in the day. Main guy, Alan Epley, then formed a band, The Life and Times. I saw them a bunch of times, loved that band, they were great. And last year, I saw Alan Epley solo at Reverb, and I did a little video about it. And also his solo album was in my top 20 albums of 2023. But Shiner was really his claim to fame. And I didn't know this, but they had sort of gotten back together already in the past, and they do little mini tours. This little mini tour was only 4 shows. And it was, like I said, my first time ever seeing the band. Holy shit, were they great. Man, excellent, excellent band. wanted to see all three bands. Okay, so I got there early to see the first band, Violenteer. Now, Violenteer, I've been hearing the name, and truth is, I know one of the guys in the band. I don't know him very well, but I knew him from like 30 plus years ago when I had my record label. He was in the band Ritual Device, and Ritual Device was a band that I put out a live 7-inch by in, I believe, 1995 or so. Obviously, that band is long since over, and I've only really spoken to Randy, who's the bass player, Randy Cotton, maybe once or twice since then in the 30 plus years. So this is my first time seeing his band, and I was curious, but I didn't have super high expectations because I just didn't know what to expect at all, right? Watching the band, and they're heavy, and they kind of reminded me a lot of like stuff from like Touch and Go Records in the early 90s and maybe AmRep records from that same period. It was great. For some bizarre reason, like it took me like 4 or 5 songs before I realized there was 2 bass players and there was no guitar. I don't know. Usually I pick up on shit a little bit quicker than that, but in this case I didn't. And then I noticed the singer, right? And I didn't know who he was or anything like that, but on one of the songs, early on, he picked up what looked like a little CB radio handle and started singing into it. And I was like, where have I seen somebody do this before? Like, that looks a lot like the guy from Season to Risk. Season to Risk was a band also from Kansas City in the 90s, and I saw them actually in the early 90s when I lived in Seattle at the off-ramp one time, and they played all throughout the 90s, and they were another very heavy kind of Jesus Lizard, Touch and Go Records-esque band, and he did the thing with the walkie-talkie, okay? Well, it took me a couple of minutes, but then I finally got on the old Google machine and realized that the singer of Violenteer is Steve Tulipana. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Who was the singer of Season to Risk, and maybe still is, because I think they're back and doing some shows and stuff too. Was like, holy shit, that's so wild. It's the singer of, so I had no idea. I was thoroughly impressed with this band. I thought they were excellent. I spoke briefly with Randy after the show, asked if they had any recordings. He said they just sent off their record to be pressed at the pressing plant, and it should be out in a couple of months. So that's something to look forward to. The middle band was Healer, and I talked about Healer a couple months ago on my video about Criteria. They were the opening band on that. This was with their new drummer. They were great, but the set was so short. Like it felt like I missed some of it, but I never left the room. I swear, if they played longer than 25, 30 minutes, I would be shocked. But good set from them, but it just went by so fast. Like I barely even had a chance to like focus. Okay, and then last, of course, was Shiner, and they were incredible, like I said. I mean, it was just a whirlwind of heaviness and whatever. It was cool. It reminded me of a lot of the stuff I used to like in the 90s, because when I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, a lot of the touch and go bands and AMREP bands. We were right in the middle, right? AMREP is in Minneapolis, touch and go is in Chicago. Madison was in the middle of those. So all those bands used to tour through. So I used to see a lot of these bands. And it was a great, I don't know how I missed China back in the day, but somehow I did. And lastly, I'll just say that there wasn't much activity with the Cats again. They have a built-in excuse, though. I mean, we did have no power for a couple of days, and I felt so bad for them because, you know, I put out like 6 different things of water, and I figured their animal instinct would tell them to come downstairs because it's cooler down here, but I don't know if they did or not. And ultimately, like, when I had my little meltdown in the heat and I left the house, I felt, I was like practically crying because I thought my cats were going to die or something in this heat. I lost my mind, literally. I did. I was so just completely far gone, and it took me a whole day and a half to kind of recover and get back into the norm here where I'm at right now. I think I'm in the norm anyways. They survived, of course. You know, they're built for... They're built a little tougher than me, I guess. I don't know. But I did feel really badly, and I bought this new fan, this gigantic fan, to cool my bedroom because it's usually a little bit warmer than the rest of the house. And I set it up when we got the power back on, and the two of them camped out right in front of the fan and just slept there for like 8 hours, just nothing but chilling in front of the fan. So clearly they were a little stressed about the heat too. All right, friends, I'm going to close out with another clip from the show the other night, and I will be seeing you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
So, you have a MySpace page or something?